Sorry, I'm having, okay. Apologize, I'm having some technical difficulties. Sharing. I have a new computer and
Congratulations.
yeah, but it's not letting me share. So I'm gonna try it one more time. Here we go. Now we go. All right, today's the 8th, right? Wait, is today the 8th? The 9th.
9th.
I have the wrong date on there. So let me just fix that real quick. Sorry. All right. Well, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Selectmen for March 9th. Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And I will do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And this is not showing let me do the slideshow piece. Okay, so next on the agenda, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of February 17th, 2021 special meeting, February 22nd, 2021, February 25th, 2021 special meeting, and March 1st, 2021 special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or changes to any of those minutes? No? Okay, all in favor of approving, say aye.
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 Okay, great. Moving on to, going on to, this is the agenda. First Selectwoman's update. I think obviously some of the big news, positive news, is that Madison has been very successful at vaccinating our residents. We've had overall roughly 27% of our population has had a first dose. This is as of March 1st. So these numbers I'm sure have ticked up quite a bit since March 1st. 76% of the age category 65 to 74 and 97% of our 75 plus population, which is exceptional, I think. And a huge, shout out to both the health department along with the senior center staff and Austin Hall, who have been working the phones for about a month now, making sure that, our senior population is getting appointments, getting help if they need to get to appointments, trying to work them into our clinics when we can. So I think those numbers reflect a lot of that hard work. We're also fortunate we have a very mobile population in Madison, even for our elderly residents. A lot of them have a support network to make sure that they get vaccinated. So I think these are great numbers, and but there's still some work to be done. We still have some vulnerable homebound residents, and we're trying to figure out a way to perhaps, do home visitations. It's complicated. There's a lot of regulation that controls that. I think the J&J vaccine actually is a huge opportunity for that, because you just have to do one visit, and it also travels better, is what I've been told. So we'll hope to tackle those remaining groups of seniors in our community that haven't gotten vaccinated and that want to get vaccinated. So we've been continuing to hold our weekly clinics. Right now, it's been pretty much dedicated mostly to the school districts. And my understanding is we've done at least half of our public school employees, which is phenomenal. And that includes, cafeteria workers and bus drivers. They had a number of, and these are multiple clinics that are running in different towns in the 5-town consortium that we're working with. But our gym has a high capacity rate. We could do, if we had enough available, we could even do up to possibly 500 a day in our gym because of the space that we have. So, we're maxing out what we can based on supply, and that's something that we don't have any control over. So, but we're moving forward, and, as we work through the public school district and private schools and childcare providers, we'll be hopefully going back to vaccinating the general public again. Big announcements by the governor, last week about a rollback of a number of restrictions. Obviously, this is going to be a big change for us, going to no capacity restrictions at restaurants, retail, library, gyms, and a bunch of other things. There's a lot of information on the governor's website about the latest changes. Gathering sizes now, private gathering sizes, you can have 24 indoors, whereas we were at 10. And then the travel advisory has been basically now is only a recommendation. So there's no requirement to get a COVID test if you've traveled out of state beyond the 3 states that we have a partnership with. And that's a big deal. I think it really frees a lot of people up, but there's still a recommendation you do so, as well as quarantine when you return, because the fact is the virus is still out there and there's still spread happening in the community. So, and so, because of some of those big changes last week, and also that we're kind of working towards that expiration of the public health emergency that was declared a year ago, roughly a year ago at this time of year, the town is going to have to be updating our policies, determining, opening up some of our facilities again for public access. And so we're spending the next week to 2 weeks kind of working through all that, what it's going to look like and what the timeline will be. So more will come out about that. So it's all good news. I mean, it's all positive news. We're going in the right direction. I think none of us would have ever imagined that we'd be still in this when this happened a year ago. But, we've managed to come through it, I think, stronger. But obviously people have been also suffered a lot over the last year. So we have to always remember that and be grateful that we see a light at the end of the tunnel now. So with that, I guess I turn it over to liaison reports and from my fellow selectmen. Let me stop the screen share. Okay, anybody have an update? No meetings. I guess it's only been 10 days since our last meeting. So
I have youth and family tonight. So.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I think just real quickly, we had the budget hearing last week, and so the Board of Finance starts its deliberations tonight on the budget. So there's no real updates on that front. There's a lot going on at the state and federal level that I think at our next meeting, I'm going to try to give a little bit more of an update on those things in terms of some of the things going through CCM legislation, things like that. So I'll hold off on that until the next meeting. Okay, no other updates, then we'll move on to citizens' comments.
If anyone would like to give public comment, you can raise your hand and I'll allow you to speak. You don't have anybody.
People are still having their coffee.
You actually have a decent number of public on today, but yeah, no one's awake
Okay,
enough yet.
we'll move on. We've got a lot to talk about. So item number 6 is discuss and take action to approve a donation from Madison Little League of sideline fencing at JC Field, value at $6,664.
So moved with gratitude. That is pretty impressive. As the former Little League president, I'm impressed.
I'll second that.
Great. All right. Great. Discussion is, I think this is fantastic that they've stepped up, and we're going to make some improvements to our fields, and we're looking forward to a normal, hopefully, baseball season this year, which is great. I don't know. Do we have any other members of the public or Little League here to talk about it, or should we? Is Scott Erskine? I don't know if we need.
Scott's here.
Okay. I don't know if we need a big discussion on it, but obviously if he wants to just highlight, the effort.
Maybe a question.
Hi, everybody.
Scott, is it fencing right on, is it JC Ox, right? At the
Yeah,
first field?
it's JC Ox. We're mirroring JC Maine with the 2 sidelines, because we've been having spectators creep into the games, as you know, on both sides. So, and we want to protect the players as well, especially on the first or third base side. We don't want them going into the timber post and rail going for a foul ball. So I think it's a good thing. They wanted to do it as far as their capital plans for the fields. So I think it's a win-win for the town and the league. So
Really
I-
nice.
It's gonna be a nice addition.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Okay, well, we're appreciative of it. It's always great to see improvements. I guess all in favor of approving the donation, say aye.
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 Okay,
Thank you.
great. All right, thanks.
Does
Next
that go to
is,
Board of Finance too, just out of curiosity, Lauren?
Yes.
It does
Yep.
go next. Okay.
Yeah, which is, I believe, the 18th.
Yeah, it's a Thursday this month, the 18th.
Yeah. So then it'll be a done deal. So,
Nice.
so in time for the season.
yep.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, item number 7, discuss and take action to approve a donation from neighbor to neighbor in the amount of $10,000 for the COVID relief fund.
So moved.
I'll second that.
And once again, with lots of gratitude, Scott, it's a recurring theme. Maybe just give a quick update on, the fund and the success you're having so far in terms of helping people.
Thank you all. Good morning. Again, Neighbor to Neighbors funding our COVID impact program. I think we have now crossed the threshold of over $100,000 in relief that we've provided directly to Madison residents through this fund. I did have a very involved conversation with Lori Heflin from Neighbor to Neighbor as we approached this particular milestone.
Yeah.
And they felt like they wanted to continue. We were open to running the program. We did suggest a few changes. One, limiting the number of overall applications. So if there were people that had yet to benefit from this program, we wanted to make sure that there was enough funding for them. And we kind of foresaw the need going into the spring. So we made those changes. We made some other minor tweaks, and Neighbor to Neighbor was happy to fund this. And you'll see also a donation into the discretionary fund. That also, that's a fund that we run through our social services. That is for any need, So we have residents who come up with things that we can't address with existing programs or state programs. We can consider this, and we reach out to Neighbor when we have those cases, and we share with them without any identifying information about what the need is, and they tell us if they would approve. Most of the time they approve. What else can you say? Just
Yeah. Wow.
we are so fortunate to have these people, and it's the generosity of the Madison residents. That this is where the funds come from. It's really it's a community program. This is the community taking care of its own.
Just curious in terms of a lot of the applications, are a lot of these people who had lost their jobs due to COVID over the last, 6 to 12 months, and they're struggling to get, to make it basically because of job loss? Is that primarily it?
Yeah, the short answer is complete job loss or loss of hours and, cutbacks, so that was a very common reason for the application on a number of, I would say most of the applications.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think, obviously Neighbor to Neighbor continues to be a phenomenal resource for our community. They're great at fundraising and getting people to step up and help. And they've been a good just organizational tool, right, to streamline the process and to work closely with you. So
yes,
we're very grateful for that. So I guess if we would like to, all in favor of approving a donation from Neighbor to Neighbor in the amount of $10,000 for COVID relief fund, say aye.
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 Right.
With
And
lots
then,
and lots of thanks.
yeah, and then just to follow on that, discuss and take action to approve a donation from Neighbor to Neighbor in the amount of $10,000 for the Madison Youth and Family Services Discretionary Fund.
So moved.
Second, again.
Okay. And so this is a little bit out of the scope of specific COVID applicants, correct, Scott? So
yes, yeah. They have funded our discretionary program for years now. So this is just a program that continues to run. And one, as our impact program, runs its course and probably ends soon, we would have this program as well as some other programs that we can help people with. So if there is continuing need, we can be there for people.
Great,
Amazing.
great. All right, all in favor of approving a donation from Neighbor to Neighbor, the amount of $10,000 for the Madison Youth and Family Services Discretionary Fund, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. With much gratitude. All right. Thank you, Scott. And thank you to Neighbor Nader once again.
Thanks,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. So next item on the agenda is discuss and take action to approve a resolution to authorize the issuance of bonds to refund in whole or in part various of the town's outstanding bond issues. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. So Stacy's on. And let's see, Bill Lindsay, who's our bond advisor, will be joining us as well, I think, and just give a quick overview. But basically, this is just being opportunistic. Interest rates continue to be at historic lows. And Stacy and Bill had worked together to basically recommend that we try to refinance some of our outstanding debt. And so this is a great opportunity. It's kind of a no-brainer in some ways. And it provides some savings on the interest expense for the town. So this is just a small targeted group. So it's not going to be huge impact, but every dollar always helps. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to, I don't know who's sharing. Stacy, you've got the screen. Okay.
I am sharing for Bill. Good morning, everybody. I think
All
Bill,
right. Good morning. Is Bill on here?
he is on here. He's on
Okay.
mute right now. So I'm going to let him take the lead though.
Okay, but I just want to introduce the public. Bill is now, Lindsay is now with Munistat, but he's actually been the bond advisor for the town of Madison for many years and worked closely with Stacy on the library bonding, which was the last bonding that we did. So with that, Bill, I'll turn it over to you. Is he there?
I have control. Excellent. Okay. So yes, good morning. Again, as the first select woman said, my name is Bill Lindsay. I think I've spoken to you all before in the past, but I'm happy to say I'm with a different firm now, and we will be opening our office in downtown Madison very shortly, in a couple months. We just signed a new lease, so we're excited about that. But we're also excited this morning to present to you an opportunity to refinance some of the town's outstanding debt at some lower costs. So, so if I could, Stacy,
Yep, hang on.
if you go to the next slide. Yeah, excellent. So what we're looking at here is refinancing roughly $3.8 million of outstanding bonds. Specifically, it's the 2012 refunding. So this is actually, interestingly, a refunding of a refunding. This will be the second time we've refinanced these bonds. They were originally issued for the in 2010 for to purchase the Griswold Airport property. We refinanced them once before, and now we're looking to refinance them once again. But by way of a reminder, it's important to keep in mind that when we sell municipal bonds, they're not callable at any point in time. So they're a little bit different than, say, your home mortgage, where we could just go to the bank and refinance at any point in time. When we sell the bonds, we sell them with an optional redemption, and it's a redemption that is at the option of the town only, so not of the purchaser, but of the issuer. And here we have to be now at or within 90 days of that call date in order to refinance them on a tax-exempt basis. And that's a little bit of a change from the last refinancing we did with the town, I believe, in December of 2017. The Jobs Act removed the ability for state and local governments to do an advance refunding, so in advance of that call date on a tax-exempt basis. So now we need to wait till we are at that call date or beyond that call date to refinance. So that's what we're doing here. So these bonds are currently callable, and we're able to refinance them again on a tax-exempt basis. So tax-exempt to tax-exempt. We only need to provide a minimum of 30 days notice to the bondholder. So we would send out a notice, and then we would have a very short escrow period and then pay these bonds off. Stacy, if you'd go to slide 3. Thank you. So in terms of the economics of the transaction, these are the only bonds that are currently callable at this point in time. So under current legislation, as I said, we can no longer do an advance refunding on a tax exempt basis. So we're focused here on this one series of bonds. But if you go down to the third bullet point and the fourth bullet point, you can see we're refinancing them at quite a bit of a lower interest cost to the town. So the average coupon on the old bonds was actually a 4%, and the effective rate on the new bonds would actually be sub 1%. So there's 3% savings here. So there's on a interest rate perspective, on a percentage basis, it's very robust. The problem is it's just not a really big issue. So being that it's not a particularly large issue, the savings is fairly modest, but it is significant when you look at it as a percentage of the prior bonds. So in terms of total cash flow savings, and I'll show you what the individual cash flow savings looks like by maturity in a moment, but the total is just over 200,000. And if we look at that on a present value basis, discounting the cash flow back to today's dollars, it's 195,000 and change. Both of those savings numbers are net of issuance costs. So the issuance costs will be capitalized into the bond issue. It's not being charged to your operating budget. And those savings are all net of expenses. GFOA now, what GFOA does in their best practice is they say you should evaluate that savings, that net present value savings, as a percentage of the prior bond amount. So here the 3.8 rounding up $3.8 million, and their best practice is the minimum of 3% net present value savings. Right now we're over 5%, 5.2% to be exact. So we're well in excess of that best practice from the GFOA. And I would point out one last thing before we move to the cash flow. We are actually reducing the par amount of the bonds here as well. And that's in part due to two reasons. One, the excellent credit quality of the town and its AAA rating. Investors are willing to pay a premium to buy those bonds. And that premium will go back into the transaction. Will not come to the town, but it'll help reduce the amount of money or debt the town needs to issue to refinance the old bonds. And that's why we see a drop of about $450,000 in face value or par amount here. So there's an added benefit, in the town's overall debt profile will come down as well. So Stacy, if you go to slide 4, thank you. So here, this is the what the cash flow savings look like. So we're talking about $20,000 a year on the town side of the budget, because this is all town debt, categorized as town debt, because again, it was issued originally for the purchase at the airport. And so we're not extending the maturity of the bonds. We're going to match up the maturity to the prior payment structure. So what you see here is what the savings would be on a fiscal basis. So I didn't know if there were any questions here. I guess point out one other thing, that under statute, the authority or the approval process is different than what we go through for a normal capital borrowing, and that the authority lies with you, the Board of Selectmen, which is, again, it's specific to just for refundings here. So that's why we're bringing this to you this morning.
Great savings. Nice.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Bill, you talked about that issue with the preserving the tax-exempt status. I understand that they might be changing that legislatively, so that could be an opportunity in the future, obviously, to look back at our bond portfolio again, if that does get changed from and that would be at the federal level.
That's exactly right. There is proposed legislation in the House right now, and there's talk of it being in the Senate as well. It would be in connection with the upcoming transportation legislation that's being discussed. And you're absolutely right. If that would be a real game changer, I think, for state and local government to really help lower their costs and take some pressure off their operating budgets. Mm-hmm. So we're hopeful that legislation gets adopted.
Yeah, because it really, if you look at, it's significant, the savings right now, to have that much, and not be able to tap into that for other, issuances. I think, it's just really a missed opportunity. So I guess any questions from board members? I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward. We've done it in the past. Does this go to the Board of Finance at all in terms of we just given provide an overview? I know I already talked about it with them that this was coming up.
Just an overview. I do think we did come up with agenda item as a courtesy, just because that's been our past practice.
Okay.
So that will be on the 18th.
And the timing of this then would be, when would you start launching this, Bill?
Well, Stacy and I are working behind the scenes to put together the information to update the town's official statement or the prospectus that we use to sell the bonds. You know, I think we'd be talking at this point, because we need to go through development of the official statement. We need to go through a credit rating review. It would be in April is when we likely come to market. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Bill, are
great.
there any other upcoming issuances that you have your eye on in the near future that we can refinance?
You know, that's a great question. I'm grabbing the town's debt portfolio here. So as the first selectman indicated that, you know, unfortunately, until they change that legislation, Al, there's, you know, these are the only bonds that are currently callable. However, the 2016, which was the last refunding that the town did, is callable in December of 24. So if the Congress grants the ability to do a tax exempt advance refunding again, I'd say that would be the first likely candidate. And, you know, we had seen, you know, 24, you know, it's only 3 years out. So that's not an excessively long escrow period. So I'd say that would be the one that we would go after first.
And it, just so I understand though, I mean, you could do one in theory, it's just would be taxable, right?
Yes.
So and I know there's been at times where the yield curves of taxable and tax exempt have actually come quite close together, where people were almost indifferent. You know, I don't know where we are in that cycle right now, because I know there was a point probably back down during the financial crisis where it was almost aligned. You know, there was very little, you know, people were just didn't, you know, because I guess that was because there was a view that there was a lot of risk with municipal governments at that time, right? So we're not in that same situation now, but I'm just curious what the spread difference is.
Yeah, it's about 75 basis points, which is low from a historic perspective.
Yeah.
There's two things to keep in mind here. We did look at that 2016 issuance. The problem is the callable coupons are all what I'll call two-handle coupons. They range from 2% to 2.75%. And so you know, there's not a lot. They're fairly low to start with. Is one. And then two, over the last quarter, let's say, you know, since December, we've seen a bit of a decoupling between tax exempts and taxables. So if you think about the 10-year taxable treasury is up basically 60 basis points since December, and munis have only gone up about 25 to 30 basis points. And so that's just hurting the economics with the taxable refinancing here. But you're absolutely right, though, is we have undertaken taxable refinancings of prior tax exempt debt for other communities where those issuance where the couponing was more favorable and the economics were better.
Right, because if they're in the twos, that's still pretty low,
yes,
right?
Yes, exactly, right.
There's not a lot of wiggle room with that, right? Okay. Any other questions for Bill? No? All right, well, I guess all in favor of approving a resolution to authorize the issuance of bonds to refund in whole or in part various parts of the town's outstanding bond issues, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 All right, great, and good luck. And also just a caveat, obviously this is subject to market conditions. You know, if things are not as favorable as this, they just wouldn't do the issuance basically. But so the next item actually just relates to this, and I would like to make an amendment to this motion because this is just basically kind of a technicality of approving the hiring of Bill as our advisor. And so if it's okay, can I just amend the motion And I would say, discuss and take action to approve the first selectman to sign a contract with Munistat for municipal advisory services through February 28th, 2022.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. And all this is doing is basically so I can sign the contract with him, because there's going to be other work besides this refunding as the school district starts looking at possibly doing the renewal plan and doing a referendum. I know that Stacy and Bill are going to be working very closely together over the next couple of months. So I also note that this contract is cancelable within 30 days notice at any time anyway. So it's just trying to a formality to get him hired as our bonded.
I think Bill is a very sharp and astute individual. He shows up on a day to get his contract renewed with a $200,000 savings. Well played, Bill.
All right. With that, then, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, great. All right. Thanks a lot, Bill. Try to bring some more opportunities to us.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
See you, Bill.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Next item is review facilities assessment study and discuss possible next steps. So this is basically following on. We had a special meeting where DRA, which is our advisor, and we have a facilities committee. There was a presentation of the kind of first phase of our facility study. And so there was kind of a little discussion about, okay, where do we envision going with this next? And so I asked DRA to come back and maybe just talk to a little bit, what they think the next steps in the process should be, knowing what our issues are and the complexity of our issues, what the scope of work would look like, timeline. And so with that, I would like to, turn it over, I guess, to Jim Barrett and Greg of DRA, please. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Peggy. How are you?
Good.
Today. And hello to the rest of the selectmen here this morning. A little more than a week ago, as you mentioned, Peggy, we did have opportunity to share initially an overview of the facility assessment that our firm undertook. And we hope to have an opportunity to further share with you a discussion around next steps. I thought it might be useful to reshare just the last couple slides of our presentation from about a week ago, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, please do. You should be able to do that. I like the Stonehenge background.
Well, so you are seeing screen 2. Does this come up now? The
Yep.
There we go.
It's
Yep, now we got
good now.
okay, perfect. Thank you. As we said, just wanting to refresh everybody's memory, the last couple slides that we shared first were conclusions that were reached around the 3 threads of the study. And to remind you, the 3 key threads of the study included facility assessment, use analysis, and the shelter review question. Relative to facility assessment, general findings were most facilities were in good condition, that as in all communities like Madison in doing these types of assessments, there are things that need to be addressed. There's 36 buildings that are held, but nothing was found to be of critical nature or nothing in terms of a significant code situation that would need immediate attention. And that there were some uses of facilities that needed further investigation. Relative to use analysis, certainly 2020 has pressed us to think differently about the future, and this morning's meeting is an example of that. a lot more virtual conversation and meeting. One question that was posed as part of the facility analysis had to do with use of meeting space specifically. And there was some information available around this issue. We applied it, but really what it led us to understand was that more data is really needed. So a focus on that collection of information really needed to best assess the utilization of spaces. Storage needs. This was something that was identified as an area of concern and really a need to explore that in terms of the range of approaches that might be undertaken. And then lastly, departments in need of additional space or more appropriate space were entered into the conversation. Lastly, under shelter review, we did identify parameters based on FEMA's recommendations. Polson and Brown seem to be good locations and candidates for this. Both Polson and Brown do require some significant investment. These shelters potentially could be done as part of school renovation scopes of work, but careful accounting has to be taken on because these would not fall under OSCG, something that is regularly done in projects around OSCGR grant funding. And then in terms of next steps, we identified the following. First, as follow-on to the assessment study, a master planning phase is recommended. The second was that a building facilities committee be established, that the findings within this study be incorporated into the annual CIP program. And then the remainder, shelter construction, scheduling, storage, and private entity use of the various facilities, all were kind of more minor, if you will, findings and recommendations as next steps. So I wanted to share this information just as a point of departure for the conversation this morning to refresh everybody's minds relative to what had been presented, and very happy to open up the conversation and have a discussion around these next steps and the findings of the study.
I guess the first question that I would have is the facilities master plan, which I think is something that we absolutely need to have as a town. And I envision that as like a 10-year plan that identifies kind of what the schools had already done with their facilities, that identifies capital needs, and that also tries to address usage, all the issues that you came out of your study with. And some of that might be 20-year plan actually, right? Because of the life cycle of buildings. So how long does that process take? Would that take, knowing the number of buildings we have, the complexities, and the resources that we have? Like, how long would that process take?
So yeah, it's a great question. And in our experience with other communities similar in size in terms of number of facilities, and right now we have 36 buildings within the study. Usually there's a subset of that really capture the lion's share of the attention. Our experience points to, a range of time. Often it's 4 to 6 months to be able to turn around facilities master planning efforts. So that is something that we would target. Now, that assumption is made upon an understanding that the outreach that would be the key element of the facilities master plan would take advantage of remote polling, remote survey, remote meeting. Meetings like this to facilitate the gathering of the information necessary to help facilitate the development of the master plan. Our findings, or our experience in that, is that we find that we get greater levels of participation. We have just in raw number, better outcomes in terms of responses. So we do find that utilization of remote technologies, whether it be polling or survey technologies, really has helped us improve the responses that we get to facilities master planning inquiry as compared to in-person meetings.
So, and I guess the issue that I see for us is that we have a lot of moving parts, right? A lot of balls in the air right now. We have one building that's dormant, that's sitting there vacant, that has a proposal on the table of one of its uses. We have another school building that is vacant as a school, but it's being rented by a private school. And there's some timelines associated with that. We have a school renewal plan that is hopefully going to be going to referendum this year, although the timeline still, the Board of Education is reviewing what that timeline is. That plan potentially could leave the town with 1 and possibly 2 vacant schools. So you know, it's complex. So I guess I question the timeline. 4 to 6 months would be, I think, if everything's static, right? But have you seen, just working with other towns, how they work through this with these multiple pieces moving, you know, and all these different variables, I guess?
Well, Peggy, I can take a start on this, and along with me, and I apologize for not mentioning, Greg Smalley is joining. He is the project manager who served as part of our facility assessment study. But, you know, the conditions that you're identifying and the concern that you're expressing around nothing is static. We're in the midst of some kind of major change within the community. It certainly is not uncommon. You know, most communities have that type of, you know, ongoing change, ongoing migration from one pattern to the next. Excuse me. So the idea that a facilities master plan is overlaying that landscape is something that's quite common. One thing that has to be allowed for is the flexibility within the master plan to accommodate outcomes that may be different within a year they are today. You know, examples of that might be outcomes of your lease situation, for example. You know, that has an end date to it and has something that's predictable. You'll plan for that. But we've seen things in communities change, and that flexibility has to be built into the master plan in terms of adaptation and ability to address issues as they come to the table. Greg, any other thoughts or comments?
Well, I agree that it's these are always dynamic undertakings, and when you look at it townwide, you have the ability to pick up groups of uses that may have some synergy or some reliance upon either program or space. And with the school program moving along as parallel to this, you may find some interaction at the shelter discussion. You may also benefit from starting to identify potential uses if a school building becomes available by having a townwide facilities master plan in play already. So I think your timing is probably more appropriate than it may feel to wrap your master plan for the facilities up and have it run parallel to the school effort and any of the other efforts in town relative to building use.
I have a follow-up question. As far as next steps and best practices, what would you envision that looking like for us?
Well, I can start with the response there. I believe, is this Aaron
Yes.
speaking?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Oh, am I not on?
You're quiet, Aaron. That's why I think it's hard to hear you a little bit.
Oh, okay.
No, that's
I'm
quite
in a
all
different
right.
place than I usually am.
In terms of facilitation of next steps, some of the key kind of recommendations are at the top of this listing. And I think the facilities master plan is a natural outgrowth of doing the type of assessment work that was requested by your community. It's the natural next question. Now that we know kind of the underpinnings and the bones of these buildings, how do we best apply it? How do we apply program to that in the most efficient manner, excuse me. The recommendation, the second bullet there, the establishment of a building facilities committee is one that speaks to trying to gather resources that are stable, that are regularly attending to issues around buildings and facilities, and is often an outcome. The third, the incorporation of this information into the CIP is a pretty straightforward step and certainly could be an initial undertaking of the Building Facilities Committee in concert with whoever your consultant is in terms of working through that. As I suggested, the remainder are somewhat smaller scale recommendations and are things that I think could almost be tackled, in a much more near-term approach. That once a building committee is established, the idea of exploration of storage policies is something that could be worked through almost with an immediate kind of schedule of start in terms of activity around understanding it, or to revise and adopt private entity use policy and protocols. Again, something that could be undertaken and acted on in fairly short order in terms of the beginning of that work. So I don't know if that answers your question, Aaron, or gives you some understanding of our thoughts around that.
Yeah, that does help. Just one follow-up is, as far as the makeup of a building facilities committee, what would you recommend that look like?
Greg, would you like to share your thoughts around that?
Are you trying to get, Aaron, are you trying to get at whether you and I have to participate?
Scott, are you suggesting you didn't enjoy it, Scott?
Oh, come on. We loved it.
Yeah, I think your best committees of that sort are those that have a continual presence from your staff side and people who know the buildings and deal with them on a hands-on and management point of view, and a equal or comparable representation from the elected side to represent the fiduciary and public side of owning and managing these buildings. A good mix like that will allow decisions to be made with information from both aspects: the public perception of how the town is taking care of its buildings, and the physical point of view from the staff of what is going on in the buildings on a day-to-day basis that might otherwise elude people that use the buildings infrequently.
Okay, can I ask another question? So just thinking about, all the things that Peggy teed up in terms of, moving parts, and I do think we have, some moving parts here. Is it your experience that it's possible to do things sort of in parallel, in the sense of, there may be things sort of happening with, like the school referendum as an example, right, that are happening in concert with a master plan that may or may not impact the results of that master plan. So how do you sort of work those things collaboratively and together?
Well, I think it's a matter of getting moving, Scott, with the understanding that if you develop information, you have the sounding board of the other efforts. So if you were to move forward on a facilities master plan and identify those areas where it overlaps with the school program, then you could take a quick side trip and study and see if there's anything to be learned on that side. And we kind of did that in the assessment study with the idea of what might it take to increase the viability of shelters. And with that, we overlapped with the school program pretty well. The other big study that's been tried is academy. And there's an overlap there as to what program and what programmatic uses may benefit from inclusion or exclusion from reuse of academy. So I think that the questions you don't ask are the questions you don't answer. And if you wait for a current program to get done and then undertake this, you may find yourself in a situation of saying, had we done that earlier, we may have had a different solution. There's nothing that says that as a master plan moves along and bumps up against a element of academy or a potential for Island Avenue, that you acknowledge it and put it off to one side and just say that because of this, we won't do that. But I don't know that there's much benefit in waiting to get started or not trying to develop that Venn diagram of overlaid uses and potentials.
I could also suggest that it's been our experience, these kind of similar smaller scale studies are ongoing. They have a life of their own. Often they're underway prior to the undertaking of the facilities master plan. It's necessary for that work to continue because they often have multiple outcomes potential. Example being a community may not support a particular undertaking in a way that's anticipated, or a community may support it and ask for additional considerations that were unanticipated. Both of those outcomes are realities. As Greg is suggesting, both of those outcomes are not the reason to say you should not start the facility master plan in advance of having the answer. Rather, you should be undertaking the facility master plan, anticipating as many of the outcomes as you can anticipate in advance, and trying to prepare the community for a response that can be adaptive to either outcome. Well, whichever outcome comes forward. I don't mean to make it binary. These things surprise me tremendously as we deal with them. Many outcomes are possible.
So I think the idea of the facilities master plan sounds good, but it's a little hard to imagine what that actually is. Would you guys be able to provide either some sort of structure or an example of what another town has done to give us some sense of the breadth of what the plan would seek to cover? And then I think I really like to draw the conversation more to the scheduling bullet point. I keep going back in time to the overwhelming voice of the community saying there is not enough programming space for community activities in the town. And unfortunately, we found ourselves a little lacking in data on what the inventory of community space was and what its utilization is. And I think that that's a really important moving piece for us to put our hands on. I think we all agree that Academy makes a wonderful location for community programming space. But in the waiting for that to actually come about, we should be doing everything we can do as a town to find a home for all of those programming needs to the best of our ability and to the best of the space that we have. So I would put it to my colleagues that really needs to be one of our operating priorities right now, is getting a handle on our space and the programming demands that we have, and balancing that need with the available resources.
Well, I would think
Well, that's
that,
what
you know, any type, sorry.
Go ahead, Peggy. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of the things I would envision at the next phase is to do that type of surveying of the community, like what you know, looking at the surveying the town employees and what they envision of what they could do with space, with lack of space, but then also having to reach out to the community and do that, because we haven't had that step taken yet, right? It's more, we've heard from people that we should be doing things, but you know, we really need to, I think, get our handle on what are the priorities of the community and what do they expect from us. And also just to see what other towns of our kind of quality of life, you know, what we offer to a community, what other towns offer that we're not offering that might be expected in the future, right? Are we behind? Are we ahead? Are we learn from our youth and family services is actually ahead of the curve. And that's where the trends are going. So I think that type of exercise would also be extremely helpful as part of this next phase in the plan.
And I'm being deliberately broad in my description of community demand, right? It's not simply a pottery class or a yoga class. It's the community at large and its programming needs, some of which are recreation, some of which are education, and some of which are social services, right? I mean, it's in the total that we need to do it. But I think, you know, to make it very actionable, I don't believe have a comprehensive tool to schedule our space and to analyze the demand. And I would hate to run out to the community and say, hey, tell us all of your demands, and not have any way to then incorporate that into a program. So I'm assuming that we don't have the program in place, and I'm assuming that there is one that exists out there since it's been suggested. Maybe that is our next course of action, is identifying and moving towards a scheduling program.
That was one of the recommendations of the facility study. I think
right.
that was on
an action item.
That was towards the bottom slide that Jim was reviewing. And I definitely think that that's something that the town, that we need to move forward with. I think that the outcome or objectives, Bruce, that you laid out are exactly what the purpose of the study would be for. So we would lay out objectives of the plan. I mean, we would lay out, and that being one of the key ones. From a timing perspective, this is also advantageous because the town, having now just gone through or is in the process of reorganizing, and Austin is now looking at programming and the programming needs and desires of the community. So that, I think, will also be important information to integrate into the analysis that you described, Bruce.
Oh, and to build on that point, Aaron, I wonder if, you know, given our last year of being in COVID land, the reality is programming needs may have you know, changed or morphed into something new and different that we can now take advantage of. I mean, obviously we're doing things more and more online, and I think we've seen the benefits and the downsides of both doing things online. So I think there's opportunities to reassess some things as well. I think it's a tremendous point.
Right. I think maybe my bigger point is that everything we do with our space pivots on the demand, what we invest in, what we don't invest in, what we expand, where we divest, those all hinge on community demand for the space.
As well as tolerance to pay for it.
Yeah. There's
Right.
a little bit of a
So we always
balancing
have
act
to,
there.
balance,
Demand doesn't always equal
right.
invest.
Yeah.
Right, but I think where
Yeah.
we have legitimate demand, we'll probably have legitimate support for it as well.
Mm.
So
I would hope so,
But consider, I mean, even think about the library and how we got
Yeah.
to the point of the library or the high school. I mean, those referendums took, 2 and 3 times to make it to public vote. So I think demand may have been there, but support publicly wasn't. So I don't know. It's sort of a catch-22 sometimes.
Mhm.
what makes this country great?
Indeed.
Well, I will say that I think that, I feel like we're all in agreement. We want to move to the facilities master planning phase, right? And so I think we all recognize there's a need for this. And we've never, and I think we've all experienced through CIP. What is guiding CIP? We're making these investment decisions with no guiding light. So I think the master planning process, the next phase, is something that we now need to launch into. I think getting some sort of proposals together about the cost of that, what it would look like, the scope, all of that. And that's probably what our next steps have to be. And then there's a few action items, I think, separately that came out of that. I think the software thing, we can easily start looking into that right away, going out and looking at what are the different options for that and how we would implement that. I think we can just do that. The staff can do that, prioritize that. Hopefully we have some money in the budget for that. We'll see where that can fit within our technology budget. I think the other piece is then the committee itself, and starting to develop the charge for that. And then, establishing that committee so that now that committee can kind of own the next phase with whatever consultant and how we work with that consultant. So I don't know if that sounds reasonable in terms of let's just have that. Our next goal is to now move into phase 2 and start, figuring out the plan, how we move forward on the plan.
Well, the only thing you have to do now, Peggy, is establish the committee.
Pardon?
Oh, hi, Bill.
You have to establish the committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I
But
think
we got to do the charge first, I think, right? We would
Yeah.
create a charge for that committee and then do
Right.
what we've done in the past, which is interview people for a standing committee.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we need to think a little bit more. I would recommend our next meeting. I'll come back. I'll speak to Bill and Dave, and and come up with a draft charge for the committee and composition and what it would look like, and we could decide on that. And then I would ask that DRA put together a more formal proposal on what they would envision phase 2. We have to talk about, depending on this, we might need to actually go out through an entire RFP process again. I'm not sure if this is like an extension so we'll have to have some conversations about that too. But obviously we're very appreciative and want to build on the work that DRA has done. So we just have to figure out how that next phase looks and how we, work with a consultant on that. So that sound good? This will be on the next agenda, and hopefully we can just get the committee charged and I'll try to get a draft of that charge out earlier so that we have an opportunity to review it and, to comment on it.
I think Peggy, you might find the report useful in coming up with the charge.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
I also think it'd be helpful just if either the DRA folks or Bill, if they have examples, because I know other towns have these committees, to look and see how other groups have them structured and what the charges are for those committees. So if you have any of that, I would recommend sending it to me, and we could use that as a starting point at least.
Yeah, I guess one question, I don't know the answer, but is it more typically led out of the town planner's office? Is it more typically led out of the facilities office? I don't know the answer. I guess I would venture to think, given it's a planning exercise, it would be coming out of the planning office, but I don't know.
I vote for Dave's office. I think he would do a great job.
Yeah, is he?
How did I know that you would
on?
probably say that, Bill?
I don't see his box. That doesn't mean he's not on. So I don't know, Lauren, did he, is he here to chime in? Okay,
There you
I'm
go.
sorry, Dave. I didn't, yeah, go ahead, Dave. You've been listening,
Yeah,
so.
I've been here the whole time. Yeah. Yeah, it should definitely be Bill. I agree. Dave and I have talked about it at length. I think it's a good role. I think we also talked about, Sam taking sort of a more active lead on the shelters. So I think, between the three of us, we've been involved in since the beginning, and both of us will definitely participate. I don't know if one of us will take more of a formal lead in different sections. That's sort of what we thought.
Yeah, I agree with that, Bill. And then, the only other thing I'd add to the conversation is, how does this relate to the library building committee, and do we consider pulling out, some of the folks that have been involved in that into the facilities committee?
I think they would be logical targets for sure. I mean, that committee has been pretty high performing. I agree with you, Dave.
Yeah, and there's a lot of skills in this community too to tap into, and that committee has.
They may be burned out though. They've been on that for 2 years now, so it's something said for that.
Okay, well then I guess we know what our next plan is, and then internally, let's talk a little bit more, coming up with a draft charge that we can send out to the board. And then I just want to thank DRA again, and we'll talk to you a little bit more about if you could start putting together a detailed proposal for phase 2, which is really the plan, the master plan process and all that. Okay.
We will do that, Peggy. Wanted to thank you and the rest of the selectmen this morning, and particularly those that served on the facility assessments committee. It was really a pleasure to work with a real dedicated team in terms of getting after the information we had to. So thank you very much.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Jim.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll
Peggy,
Greg.
the next item, I don't know if you want the DRA guys, I'm volunteering them. They did the Island Avenue facility review in 2015. I sent you that information. I didn't know if you were going to be talking about that, and
I mean, it's helpful if they want to hang out for a few minutes and listen. I think I actually have a kind of 1 or 2 slides to help us talk through this a little bit. But there might be some specific questions from board members, because this is a nice transition into one specific building that we have to make some decisions on. And this kind of alludes to part of my questions. We have many moving parts, each have their own different deadlines and requirements and needs. And so what I will do now is screen share. So we'll move on to item number 12, which is review the proposed timeline to referendum for future of the Island Avenue School building. So, and this is basically just following on a conversation we had. Why can't I share the screen? Hold on a second. I'm very slow on my new computer. I apologize. So, all right. So let me do this. Let me do this. And then I got to go use slideshow. Okay. So, we had a conversation, last week kind of about Island relative to this whole master planning process. And I think it engendered a lot of discussion, because the Island committee was launched, gosh, it was a year ago, basically, with the idea that we have a timeline that we have to meet. We have a tenant, that needs to know their future. And we had to make decisions about, do we continue leasing the building? Do we just not have a tenant and sell it? Do we, even hold on to it empty like we have with Academy until we figure out what our grand plan is? So the committee was launched. They came back to us, I think it was in December, with kind of final recommendation about moving the building to an RFP process. And so that's kind of triggered us to have to start thinking about, okay, what are our next steps? And do we want to go through that RFP process? Do we want to step back and reflect some more? And then we asked Colliers to put together a proposal about, well, if we went to RFP, this is kind of how it would work and what the timeline would be. Our town council also prepared, and the board received a copy of a timeline that if we were going to take this do an RFP and take it to referendum, this is kind of the timeline that it would look like. So a lot of different pieces of information. So I wanted to kind of just step back and say, let's talk about this. What is the issue? First of all, we have a tenant in there whose lease expires. We just renewed it, and it will expire in July of the end of July in 2022. So around 18 months from now, just shy of that. The existing lease has no renewal option. And that was part of the negotiation process that the board went through last year. People were uncomfortable going beyond a 1 or 2 year lease because of the fact that we knew we were going to be doing something with the building and had to make some long-term decisions. The other thing is that OLM has been very, wants to know its own future. And, you know, they have a school, they have to enroll students. They're looking at, they want a permanent home. So this kind of year by year roller coaster has been difficult for them. And they've been eager and said they want to participate in an RFP process, and they will be submitting some sort of proposal. And they've told us that. So that's kind of one just factoid that we have to factor into this decision-making process. So the charter requires that in order for us to sell property, we can do this either by approval of the legislature through a town meeting or through referendum. And, you know, I think all along this board has said we want to take this to referendum. This is a high profile property. It's an important town asset. And so I just want to highlight the fact that we've kind of assumed that we would take this to referendum, but by doing that, we do complicate the decision-making timeline. And, you know, because referendums it's much easier to schedule a town meeting and to pull that together versus going through a referendum process. But so we need to understand that referendum process then really drives things at times about our decision-making process. So I just wanted to highlight that. We have a lot of referendums possibly coming up. So we have the school renewal plan, which could be possibly this November, you know, but we're waiting to hear back from the Board of Ed on their final decision on that. We've talked about Island Avenue. We've talked about Academy. Right now there's a community center proposal collecting dust, but we also recognize that Academy is now kind of moved into the master planning process. And then we have a charter revision committee that ultimately that is going to have to go to the public for a vote. And so, you know, knowing that we have these items, the other issue is that, you know, if we were trying to get something done this year, and I think this was the discussion we had at our last meeting, we would really need to have that question called by September 2nd. And this is something I had confirmed with our bond counsel, because it is the general, you know, and I think this was the timing was a little fuzzy to me because it was a municipal election this year versus a state ballot or a federal election. We still have to follow state statute in terms of how we run municipal elections. And so we would have to have this question. The board would have to send this to referendum and have that vote with the question approved by September 2nd. So anything that's going to be on that ballot, what's the schools, Island, Academy, you know, that's the timeline we're operating under. And so obviously to get it to that point, you have a series of other deadlines. And Floyd had laid a lot of these out in the timeline he sent to us. And so it's a tight timeline. It's very tight, you know, to try to meet that September 2nd thing for Island in particular, I think. We've also talked about, well, what about the facilities master planning process, and why aren't we incorporating Island into that? And as you just heard, the consultants had said this could take 4 to 6 months. I'll wager that it's going to take at least 6 and probably more like 9 months to a year, just because you're involving public input. Even the, you know, conditions assessment ended up taking 2 months longer than we had anticipated. So, but you know, we have a lot of properties that we have to work through with multiple issues. To the point I was making earlier, we have a school renewal plan that could completely change the outcome of that portfolio of properties, depending on how whether or not the public votes for it. You know, I think Island had always been kind of earmarked or as a funding source for the school plan. You know, I think there's also we got to be cognizant as far as, you know, that Island is going to need some money put into it at one point. And so there was a report done, in 2015 about the building. And one of the things that we should be exploring as far in the next phase of the facilities master plan is, what are the capital requirements for Island going forward? And it's really taking what they already said in 2015 and updating it. And then you're going to have to layer onto that what alternative uses would be and what the cost of those alternative uses would be. So I think that would have to be part of any kind of master planning process if we're going to include Island in that portfolio, because that's going to drive decision making, just like we did for Academy. Like, how much money was it going to cost to convert Academy into a usable municipal space? And then just one other point I want to highlight is that we are in an extremely hot real estate market right now. And, the Island property is arguably one of the most sellable properties that the town owns, besides the surf club, which we would never do that. So it has a premier location and it has real development opportunities. That's the recommendation that we know we have a bidder interested already who is waiting in the wings, the school. And then we also know that it's feasible to develop and it's an attractive property for development. So I think it was important to just lay all those data points out, because there's so many different factors around this decision. And then I think if you go this next page, I was trying to lay out, okay, well, what are our options now, right? So how do we work through this decision process? It's not easy, and these are not simple decisions. I don't think anything is like a no-brainer where you're like, you just got to do this and be done with it. I think we have to weigh all these different things, and there's not going to be a perfect answer also either. So I think we have to kind of choose a path that tries to, tackle all the different questions that have been raised, but also, meet some of the deadlines and timelines that we need to be conscious of. So if I look at the options, and this is just, I thought helpful, and, you can weigh in a few minutes if you think it is helpful to think of it this way. But, the first point is more what we had been talking about a month ago. And what the Island Committee was recommending is just go to RFP. It's, just launch the process now. And I had a follow-up conversation with Mark Skalenka at Colliers, as well as with Floyd, that if we got this launched now, we could, in theory, have, a question called by the end of August. It would be a very aggressive timetable. Everything would have to align, but we could do it. But, let's be practical. We know things always end up taking longer than we think. But what that does do, at least, it gives us a final decision, definitive information to make a decision about the building. And it would allow it to be voted on by the public in November, and we'd be done. We'd know what our path is. So there's some really positive things of that, but then there's obviously you give up some things by doing that as well. I also think it's going to capitalize on this real estate market right now. And even we talked about with the bond advisor, interest rates are at their lowest ever. So there's just a really strong development market out there in real estate. So, yep.
Peggy, can I just interject for 1 second?
Sure. Yep.
Just from the perspective of kind of laying out the facts, I just want to also just make it clear that the Island Avenue Committee gave recommendations specifically relative to what should happen if the town was to dispose of Island. What is the best alternative within the context of the town getting rid of Island? So I think that's an important distinction to make, because they did not do any analysis of the benefits to the town of keeping Island. So I think that's just
yeah, you're absolutely right. No, absolutely.
Not to in any way discount their outcomes or their analysis, because it was very helpful, but I do think we should just kind of, make sure that that's clear.
Right. And that was the charge that we all, unanimously voted for back in January, I guess, of 2020.
Well, we just said, look at uses except for a school. That's what the charge said.
Is that what it? Okay.
Yeah. So we excluded specifically the use of as a school, because that had already been eliminated.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that they had
but to be clear, as a public school, not as a private school.
Oh, right.
There's a
as a school, the town use as a school.
Correct.
So, So yes, and I think so I'm just trying to walk through though,
No, yes.
And I think that's a fair
sorry
point.
to ruin
Yeah,
your
no, that's
flow.
fine. That's a fair point. So I think, you have this RFP process that had been kind of came out of that, and they even drafted an RFP for us. And so we kind of said, okay, so maybe that's the next phase. And we talked about that of moving forward with the RFP. So that is, I think, it's fast, it's quick. It ultimately gives the people a vote on the property by November. It's aggressive, and it doesn't allow for this other dialogue that we just had about the facilities master plan and all the multiple, things that the town is thinking, the bigger picture. It doesn't allow for the bigger picture. This is like a rifle shot to solve one problem, right? And that's what I would say option A is. Option B is, what we've kind of discussed a little bit more. Can we do both? And Scott was kind of alluding to that, I think, earlier when he was talking to DRA. Nothing's static, right? A master plan is not a static thing. It's going to have to be a living document that evolves and changes as things happen in the community and decisions happen. So option B is we could say, okay, let's plan on doing an RFP. We recognize that that's the best way to identify what the opportunity cost is for the town if we don't sell the property. Because there is a cost if we keep it for municipal use for other alternative uses like a community center or, town offices or whatever would come out of the facilities plan. There is a opportunity cost for that. Okay. Just like there's an opportunity cost if we sell it to a developer, we sell it to the school, the town loses out, but it's easy to quantify that opportunity cost, I think, through an RFP process. And so the timeline on that would be, we wouldn't be able to make a referendum question by November. It would be unrealistic to be able to get to that point, but we would at least have proposals and potentially down to negotiating with one party by the fall. And so that would allow us then to take whatever the outcome of that is. And if it is a sale, then it would allow us to bundle that with some potential 2022 referendum questions. It also would allow us to take the next 4 to 6 months and have that master planning process start. And so, if there's something substantive, and I think that comes out of that, that would be helpful. And it would also allow for, if the schools go on the November ballot, and we still don't know if that's going to be ultimately the timeline that the school board wants, we have an answer on the schools. Because we have like a lot of variables. So now in November, we might be, in the process of negotiating with a party, but then all of a sudden we have the referendum outcome possibly known in terms of the school plan, which would help us with some of our decision making. So anyway, and this is, I'll send this around to the board. This was meant for conversation. Then the final option is more just like on hold, put it into the master plan and just do the master plan. The problem with that is we have a lease sitting out there. And I think that in order to just defer and delay any kind of decision, I think we would have to go back and say now to the people at OLM that, we're going to grant you a 1 year or at a minimum 1 year lease extension, because I think to try to, what we know arguably is probably going to be the end of 2021, then we're facing that hard deadline. The school needs to know their future. And, we also risk that they might not want to stay any longer, so we're kind of putting ourselves, I think, in a little bit of a difficult position, perhaps with a tenant that has been, paying rent to the town, that's helped the town, that's brought in revenue for the town. So I've been talking a lot, but I think I was really trying to think this through. And I think this was just trying to really lay out, how do we navigate through this? I guess I would advocate that I think the A is unrealistic and perhaps doesn't address some of the concerns that, people are raising with the facilities committee. and the facilities plan. B kind of gives us a little bit of the best of both worlds. And I feel like C is not going to really serve us well in the long run, because it's just continuing to kick the can down the road. We also have an existing tenant that needs a little bit more definitive understanding of the timeline that they're under. So those are kind of my high level thoughts on that. So I will stop talking now and let the board weigh in. I know I'm, this is kind of all new stuff, but this was me brainstorming last night, trying to figure out how we work through this discussion.
Yeah, I think my only concern is that we have some undefined need lurking in the wings that we've yet to uncover, and that once we've divested the property, it's gone. We can't ever get it back. I think you've laid out the options pretty well, Peggy. And I agree, as you've described them. Option B seems to make the most sense, and hopefully we would get serious inquiries above and beyond just OLM prep from bidders, recognizing that this wasn't a completely set in stone path. Maybe it would cause all interested parties maybe to sweeten the pot just to entice us to move in their direction. I don't know, but I do think that we need to get our hands and our arms around what are our needs in the town before we permanently take something off the table.
Yeah,
Peggy,
I think I tend to agree with Bruce here. Yeah, I think I also
We're
like.
recording this, Scott.
I agree with you a fair amount, don't I? So I do like option B as well. I think it provides us an opportunity to gather facts while still propelling the process forward. I think the community has given us the indication at multiple points in this process where they want some decisions made. They want to start seeing some progress. So I think this builds up a line of sight to an integrated master plan in the context of our strategic plan, but also gathers the appropriate level of facts, whether it be the market data point of the actual facility, whether it's how it integrates with the master plan, and frankly, just options from developers et al. I think it's an opportunity for us to really have all the facts in front of us all at the same time. I do think, I come back to your point though, Peggy, about OLMP and just our current tenant and just the fairness aspect to them. So I do, and I have said this on record multiple times throughout the process here, I just think we owe it to them to be fair and respectful, given that we have, families, going to a school that need to understand whether that school is going to be in existence in the upcoming years. And so I think we just need to be considerate and respectful to their situation as well. So I think that's my I think that's my thought.
I agree with that, Scott, and I think the best way to do that is to be completely transparent about the process, so that people can plan accordingly. I do think that we also have to balance that with the overall needs of the town. And I think, Peggy, thank you for laying this out, because I think it was really helpful to see it in this way. I think I've said previously that I strongly believe in a planning process. I think it's really important, especially now with the reorganization of the departments and change in staff, that we have a comprehensive data-driven plan that's making data-driven decisions. But I also think we have to be realistic. So I think that option B seems to be the kind of the balance there.
And I'd just like to add, we're all being very deliberate and staying away from a monetary description of the property. The value of this property, the community is certainly has a financial component to it, but there are intangible values, I think, that we should recognize. The use by OLMP has an intangible value to the community. So I think it's important that we recognize we're not just focused on the money.
That's an awesome point, Bruce. I really, again, agree
Wow.
with
you.
Wow.
2 for 2.
2 in a row here. Yeah, I think the value to the community has been, well articulated too by the current leasee, OLMPA, and I think there's a lot of intangible benefits to the town in terms of families coming to our town to invest in our community. So I agree with you. I think that's a great point.
Peggy, I find your analysis incredibly helpful in terms of how it's organized, and I think maybe it's brought your selectmen together on this. In the past, I think previous boards of selectmen have not thought as strategically as this board is thinking. We would probably have been tempted in the past to look at one property at a time, and I think that town government should be making decisions for the long run. Our decisions will have impacts on the future of this town for decades, if not centuries. And so I like the fact that you are forcing us to think strategically and think about the long term. I'm going to join the chorus. To me, option B represents the best balancing of a variety of considerations. And I would like to see us proceed in line with this parallel hybrid option B.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. I think one of the key things of option B in order to keep things moving forward is to figure out what are those data points that would help us create a level of comfort, that the RFP process is the right step forward for that property. One of the, so what I would like to do, and maybe this kind of feeds into item number 13, is that we need to, I think, first of all, we could do a couple different things. One is I think we need to then get our arms around an update of what the issues are with Island Avenue in terms of the conditions assessment, right? And really understanding, okay, if this is going to be, if we're looking at alternative uses for this building, there's going to have to be some investment made in the building. We all understand that. Well, what are those big issues? I think, and that's something I think that can be done fairly quickly, building on a tremendous amount of work that has already been done. I think the other piece is, okay, do we want to actually update the value, an appraisal of the company, and do some sort of market valuation rather than having the RFP? The RFP is ultimately going to be the market value, right? Decision, but we had an appraisal done back in 2015, and I think it valued it at like $2.7 million. The market is completely different now. And I do want to say that this is a time where we don't want to be missing out on opportunities either, because there is an opportunity cost for delay. So, is it worth, potentially just moving forward and either taking the appraisal that had been done previously or hiring and, having somebody and updating it. So that's all going to cost money. So I would want to spend some time perhaps and put together a limited scope of work of what it would cost to get these data points handled. And then hear from the committee, what other things we think we would need to do over the next 2 months to focus on, to kind of help our decision-making, clarify it a little bit, maybe take some options off the table. And I don't know if we have an answer for that, but I guess what I'm advocating is number 13. I think when we go to RFP, we want to hire a professional, but maybe we hold off on actually a specific contract that's been proposed and make sure that we have the right scope for that contract. And maybe add in some of these other pieces to that contract. And that's something that I could just bring to the next meeting.
Sounds like a great idea. I mean, I think gathering the data point to Aaron's point earlier about transparency, I think, it's not only transparency to the current leasee, but transparency to the public of, what the true current value is of the building and of the property. And obviously that's changed since 2015 considerably.
Right. So I'm just wondering then, so from, number 13, we could table that basically, and then come back with a more targeted, this is what we're going to envision over the next 2 months, and this is what Collier's role would be in that. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So we don't need a vote to table, do we? We just table it?
No, I'll just mark the minutes
Yeah,
that you guys
okay.
table the vote. Yep.
All right. Okay. All right. So if everybody's good, now we have kind of our game plan. And we'll make some more decisions the next meeting on what data points we're going to focus on getting. Okay, moving on.
I don't have to agree with Bruce anymore during this meeting though, do I?
Now and forever.
I think it should be reversed next time though, that Bruce has to always agree with Scott.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For the
I
next
like your
meeting.
thinking.
We'll talk about that in executive session.
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Okay, and I know, all right, real quickly, item number 14 is, can I get a motion to approve the following resignations and appointments? Resignation of Rachel Salvo from the Pedestrian and Advisory Committee. Appointment of Jean Morrissey from the Bicycle and Advisory Committee alternates to regular member for a term to expire January 1st, 2025. The appointment of Bill Baker to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2025. And the appointment of Richard Vansel to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee alternates for a term to expire January 1st, 2024.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your service, Rachel, and welcome. And thank you for stepping up to our new members of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Okay, item number 15. Can I get a motion to approve tax refunds in the amount of $47,715.60?
So moved.
Second. I'll second it. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, citizens' comments.
There are none.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda, and for the public's benefit, we are going to be moving into executive session to discuss a sensitive land purchase negotiation process. So I would like to move to go into executive session and to invite in Lauren Rhines, Dave Anderson, Bill McMinn, and I think, is our superintendent here today? Was he joining us? Craig Cook? He was kind of, if he could make it.
He's here.
He's
Okay,
there,
I'll
and he
invite
said his
him
hand
into
raised.
Okay, I'll invite him into executive session. I'll say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Just give me 1 second to move some people.
And so
And
just
I
for the
have-
public,
I'm sorry.
just say the public's benefit that we will be going now into an executive session and then we come out to close the meeting. So there's really not going to be any more public meeting after this. So.
I'm going to excuse myself